Yo, what's up? New year, new Vanguard. How are you guys? Great to see everybody back in 2023. Holy shit, that's weird to say. 2023. I feel like the last 3 years just really disappeared off the calendar, and I feel like such a boomer saying that. But I'm like, man, ever since 2020 happened, I'm like, yeah, it's still just like it's not real. Nothing's felt real yet. You know what I mean? Like the time period between the last flight I took before COVID-19, right, which was Valentine's Day 2020. Okay, and now I'm like, wow, this is all just like one big like whirlwind. I feel like 2023 will mark the true return to like life after all of this. So we just erase from the chalkboard everything that happened in between that time. Fine by me. But how are you, Gavin? How are you doing today?
Doing great, doing great. Yeah, I could not agree more with what you're saying, Zach. It's really wild how time has passed since the pandemic. And yeah, it does seem like we're finally starting to truly get back to normal in a real sense here. I mean, obviously, lots of things are kind of changed forever, but yeah, it does seem like we're out of the pandemic. And that people are kind of readjusting the way they live their life finally. Do you think that that's a permanent change?
Permanent change that we're like done caring about the pandemic?
Yeah, just society reverting.
Oh, 1,000,000%. That's already happened. In fact, so I've been telling myself one of my New Year's resolutions is that I'm gonna do one of those open mic nights, right? And I've written a couple of stand-up bits just for fucks, right? When I'm like, having a good time. And one of them that I wrote about was like it's like a long joke about like fucking comedy being a free lunch in the 80s, and now it's all like fucking cutthroat out here. But the other thing, it's like a punchline about elevators, and it's like we went through all of COVID-19, and the only thing that changed is you're now allowed societally to be like a dick in the elevator, like, oh, sorry, just really concerned about the fucking viruses right now. That's why I'm spamming the elevator door shut anyway.
That is hilarious. I will say I definitely got more germophobic after the pandemic in general. Like I used to not wash my hands before every meal and that kind of stuff, or every time I got back from going anywhere. And now I do that. That's one permanent change that's occurred in my life since the pandemic. And I think that's for the better, right? I mean, it's definitely a good thing to be hygienic and to wash your hands and all that good stuff. But either way, as Zach said, welcome back to the Vanguard, every guys. Really appreciate you all tuning in. First stream of 2023, about to be lit. And shout out to you, Alex, for the first super chat of the live stream. Really appreciate that, man. 199. Hey guys, what's your favorite weed, indica or sativa? You know what, man? I've been smoking for a long time now. And to be completely honest, I don't think I have an answer to that question. Like, to be honest, good weed is good weed to me. I don't really care about the difference between indica or sativa, or really even strain to strain. I know that might be a controversial opinion. I know a lot of people would strongly disagree with me. But yeah, I really couldn't tell you much of a difference as far as one weed to another weed and how it affects me, as long as it's decent shit.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would have. I don't want to do that. I probably would have said the same thing too until I went and got woke about this issue, right? But I actually, after again, like going through the whole medical process, right? Like, and having them like tell you exactly, it's like, oh yeah, you have this like mental health problem. Like, we basically have that road mapped already. Like, just buy this kind, and it'll be better. You won't have to take like whatever over the counter pharmaceutical if like this is the kind of issue you're having. And I would have never, I like put a gun to my head, I would have never guessed that it was going to be like a CBD indica blend. But that's like basically like my like go-to now is it's just like, oh, this will just like calm down your brain and yourself, and you won't like be all like as much, but it doesn't like fuck with your head too much, so you can like still live a relatively like just unstoned existence, right? But anyway, it really depends on what you're going for. Obviously, if I was like going to see like fucking, King Giz and the Lizard Wizard, I would still get like a just fucking insanely warped fucking sativa and just go to town on and blast off. But for like a day to day kind of like deal, more the other way around.
Yeah, that's fair. And isn't it true that a lot of the strains that do have high CBD content, they're actually the ones that are lower in like the amount of THC?
Yeah, it varies, right? But yeah, basically I think that's like the compromise that you have to make, because it kind of like balances out a little bit more. It's a little more like medicine, right? So like if you take an Adderall, obviously you get like a fucking, you get the head rush, you get the focus, you get all of those kinds of things, and that but it has a lot of like the fucking drawbacks. And the indica sativa, or excuse me, the indica CBD blends, they typically have a little bit like of a slower onset of how you like feel, and you'll just get like a little bit of like, oh, okay, now this is kind of like kicking in. I can, kind of like settle down a little bit more. Like, you get a little bit of like that heaviness in your muscles a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, shout out to you, Alex. Thanks so much for the super chat, man. And thank you so much for the 9.99 as well. Most anticipated movie of 2023. I'm weirdly curious about the Jesus movie or the hippie Jesus movie, the Jesus Revolution. I'm not familiar with that, Alex. Sounds like an interesting film for sure. I'll definitely have to look that up. As far as my most anticipated films, it's definitely either Ari Aster's Disappointment Boulevard, which actually I think recently, yeah, it's called like Beau is Afraid, I think, which is, I'm not sure if I like that name more
It's
or
a
not.
worse name for sure.
Yeah, it is. That's what I thought too. I was like, I think Disappointment Boulevard was a better name. But anyway, Beau is Afraid is the upcoming Ari Aster film starring Joaquin Phoenix. It's his third feature length film. And I'm super excited for that. I think he's one of the best, most talented directors working today. And I just cannot wait to see what the hell he came up with. Apparently, it's like over 3 hours long. So very ambitious is what I've heard. Super excited for that. Also, super excited for Infinity Pool, the new film by Brandon Cronenberg, which stars Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård. I've been a big fan of the first couple films by Brandon Cronenberg, who's of course David Cronenberg's son. But this one looks like it's going to be on a whole nother level. Looks like he got a real budget, higher production value, and he's really going to be able to realize his vision in a way that perhaps the last two films were hindered by the lack of budget and production value. So super excited for that. Have you seen the trailer for Infinity Pool, Zach?
I watched a little bit of it. I'm also pretty excited for it, but I haven't finished it all. But yeah, I did like his last movie that we watched, like Possession. Yeah. I think it might have been Possessor, but anyway, it was good. Really like that. He has his own unique kind of directive, creative vision, which I think is interesting. Like definitely inherits some things that you could see in his father's work, but he really stands on his own 2 feet, which is something you look for in like a son of a famous director. Like, are they able to like execute their own thing, or are they trying to just accomplish what their old man did, which is cool. A couple of other films you didn't mention that I'm looking forward to: Barbie, the new Greta Gerwig film. Really excited for that. I think it's going to be good. I'm hoping that it's good. I like Greta Gerwig a lot. I also really like Ryan Gosling. I think he's an underrated actor. A lot of people write him off as like the dude from The Notebook or whatever, but that dude can act his ass off. And I feel like real film people know just how competent and quality he can be if given the right role. And he really ventures off and does some cool indie projects every once in a while, in a similar way to like Robert Pattinson. I feel like some people might write him off as like a fucking just heartthrob kind of a guy, but he actually also acts a lot. So super excited for Barbie and what goes on there. Pretty excited for Killers of the Flower Moon. I hope that's good. I like Martin Scorsese a lot. I'm typically like, I mean, I didn't like The Irishman that much, but I did love Wolf of Wall Street, and I've liked almost all. I mean, he's Martin Scorsese, right? So you can never like not give that guy the benefit of the doubt. And then I'm also really, really excited for Oppenheimer. I think that that's going to be really fucking good, and I'm hoping that this is a kind of a return to form for Chris Nolan in a way that I'm going to be happy with, because I wasn't that big into Tenet.
Yeah, I'm also hoping that Oppenheimer's better than Tenet. We both agreed that film was basically a slog. So yeah, anyway, shout out to you, Alex. Really appreciate it. Love kickstarting the show with some movie talk. And shout out to you, Andrew, for the 199. There is no normal. Yeah, that's true. All I meant was like, clearly we all lived in a different way before COVID. And now, a lot of things have changed. So I was just talking about how things are seemingly returning to that way we lived previously in a lot of different areas. But of course, you're correct, Andrew. We're never going to fully return to a world where there was no COVID or pandemic.
That's true. I still think it generally refers colloquially to a period in time that we would all describe as pre-COVID. But I guess we could just call pre-COVID as a more specific return to like normal, right? Because our normal slightly has changed. As Gavin said, his new normal now involves like, carrying hand sanitizer with him in his bag most of the time, or whatever the fuck he said.
Yeah. And shout out to you once again, Andrew, for the $4.99. Really do appreciate that. I've lost all interest in movies since the booting of Henry Cavill. He is and always will be the #1 Superman. If you disagree, you are incorrect. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can understand losing interest in DC movies if that's your thing and you really liked Henry Cavill. But all movies, you lost interest in all movies because of that. I got to hard disagree with you there, man. I think there's a lot of other great movies out there that are in no way impacted by the recasting of the Superman character. And to be completely honest, I was never a fan of Man of Steel. I was never a fan of any of the Zack Snyder Justice League stuff. That's not Henry Cavill's fault. He's a good actor. He did a good job in the role. But the fact that they're taking a different direction and doing a hard reset, I actually think is a great idea. So nothing against Henry Cavill, but I actually think it's a good idea that DC is moving away from the Zack Snyder direction and doing basically a hard reset under the direction of James Gunn and Peter Safran, who, in my opinion, are far, far, far better picks for that job than Zack Snyder ever was. Maybe you disagree with that, Andrew. No hard feelings, but that is my opinion.
See, here's the thing, Andrew. I'm gonna hit you with that's a hot take because everybody in the comment section is obviously saying the obvious choice is Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeves, I think is his name actually. But anyway, that dude, it was fine, right? I never really fucked with the Superman movies. Here's my hot take for you in return, Andrew. Superman is a bad character. There's not enough problem there. There's not enough of an arc there. The guy can do everything, so he sucks basically because it's just like who wants to be like he wants to follow the guy that always wins. He's faster than a speeding bullet, laser vision. Oh, he's against kryptonite. Yeah, how about you stay away from that shit? Oh, end of the story. You're fine. You could beat every bad guy. You could save every damsel in distress. It's like it's over and over again. That's why the only really interesting thing and it's not like the show was great, but like I thought Smallville was more interesting because then at least it's like, oh, and this is how bad your storyline has to be. If the best thing that ever comes out about you is like your pre-character arc that they like lazily put together because they were trying to have like teenage soap opera content, like Scott, like Smallville was, really it was like One Tree Hill, but with Superman growing up. If that's the best thing you put out, that says numbers about the quality of where you can go as a character. But at least then there was some struggle. There was some development. It was like watching a coming of age drama, but absolutely none of that had to do with the fucking character of Superman. Oh gosh, now I can bend steel and, fly and shit and whatnot. I don't know. Always loses me. Never really cared about Superman. Thought Man of Steel was terrible. And that's the only Superman movie I've ever seen in theaters. So that's my hot take for you, Andrew, but nothing but love to you, guy.
Yeah, I largely agree with that. I think it's possible to do a good Superman. It's a lot more difficult given the fact that, like you said, Zach, it's basically an invincible character. I feel similarly to Wonder Woman. It's like if you're just talking about a character that's almost undefeatable, it's a lot harder to care. It's a lot harder to get invested. But shout out to you, Alex. This is a good point. I want an art house Superman movie. That would be interesting. And, Zack Snyder kind of tried to go for a little bit of that with Man of Steel. There was clearly like some Terrence Malick influences and stuff like that. But he did not go all the way at all. And basically it just reduced into a giant CGI blockbuster spectacle in the last 45 minutes, which I thought was super disappointing. But yeah, I would like to see something like that where it's like a different kind of take on the character. I think that could be successful, although I agree that it's very hard to pull off.
Yeah, if somebody came to me and said they were making an art house Superman movie, I would probably just, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, if it looked good, I guess I would check it out. But it's kind of like when they told me that they were making like a horror version of Winnie the Pooh. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, the license is up. You can do whatever you want with Winnie the Pooh now. You just can't give him the like honey pot and red t-shirt or whatever that you can give him. But it's like something that Disney owns that's not the rest of it. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about an art house Superman movie. It's like, oh, I don't know. Like, is it like, oh, it's interesting because here's this everyday man that has to live an everyday life because he never became Superman? And it's like, wow, even if he becomes, and it's all about like the meaninglessness and nihilism of life. I don't know how you make a Superman art house movie. Is that just code for making a good Superman movie? I don't know. But shout out to you, Alex. Really appreciate that. It looks like you also said that your friend Wyatt, who shout out to him for being an actor in your short film. That's cool. But he worshipped Zack Snyder. Yeah, there was a real poison that was going around our generation where people got the worst film takes ever. Like the video store generation, they were all right on track. Like those guys had some real influences. They were digging back into like the French New Wave. They were getting excited about cinema. They were, synthesizing that and like bringing it to American audiences in a romantic and exciting fashion. Nowadays, it was weird. I did one semester in my brief stint in film school, right? And I remember everybody that was like saying what their favorite filmmakers were. And I was like really scratching my head. Zack Snyder came up a lot. Sam Raimi came up a lot. Not really so much for The Evil Dead, which I could have respected, but it was because they were calling him like the godfather of the superhero genre because he made Spider-Man 1 and 2 and 3 before the other shit out. And I was like, I've really like had my mind twisted. Like I was so shocked at all these people like, and Nolan was obviously like a crowd favorite. And I kind of like Nolan, but I mean, not that much. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't think he was, I like Nolan, but I think it's a stretch to say he's like top 5 or top 10 of his generation outside of the blockbuster mold, because he has made some bad movies, that movies I just don't like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely true. I had the same
Pretty much
experience in
alongside
films.
Baz Luhrmann.
What?
I said I'd probably put Christopher Nolan alongside like Baz Nolan, whom I don't personally like, but I know who people really like rave about. You know what I mean?
What? You cannot say Nolan is on the same level as
They
Baz
both make a
Luhrmann.
fuck ton of money with their movies, but some of them are bad and some of them people really like. Like, I don't know, dude.
No, dude, that's not true.
That's how
Memento, The Prestige,
The
Inception, The Dark
Prestige
Knight.
and Inception
Those,
were good. And
those are four better movies than Baz Luhrmann will ever dream of making. I'm sorry, but that will not stand. You've crossed the line.
Gavin's getting in his feelings. He's like 13 again. He's back at The Dark Knight Rises. He thinks it's the best movie he's ever seen.
I'm not even a Chris Nolan simp, to be honest. I matured out of that long ago, and I agree that Dark Knight Rises is no masterpiece, far from it. But again, Memento, The Prestige, Inception, The Dark Knight, Dunkirk, 5 movies that are better than anything Baz Luhrmann has ever made. What's one Baz Luhrmann movie that's even almost as good as one of those films?
I don't like any Baz Luhrmann movies. I was just putting him in a group of fucking directors where it's like, oh, they make a lot of money, they have a lot of name recognition, but I don't think they're necessary. Like Christopher Nolan is a better director than Baz Luhrmann. That was a low blow. That was too low. That was too low down. I was trying to think of like a name of a director that like our audience would know that I didn't also like really like way more than Christopher Nolan. I was like, well, people like that. I actually fucking hate Baz Luhrmann. I think his Great Gatsby movie is terrible. I thought that his Romeo and Juliet movie was damn near unwatchable. Even shout out to Paul Rudd for getting his like career jump start in that before he was in Clueless. Anyway, we're off on a real weird tangent here. Obviously, Christopher Nolan's a way more competent director than Zack Snyder and Baz Luhrmann, who I would put in the other portion of my brain, right? That was, because I feel like you would agree Zack Snyder and Baz Luhrmann kind of belong in the same boat.
And I mean, they both have distinct styles and like hardcore fans.
Their movies do make money for the most part.
Oh yeah, definitely. To be honest, I didn't hate Elvis, the new Baz Luhrmann film. I saw that it was a little bit too long. It was kind of unintentionally funny in a few parts, but I didn't hate that movie. I would be interested in your opinion if you ever get around to checking it out, Zach. The one thing I didn't love about the Elvis movie was Austin Butler's performance in the lead role. I felt like they needed someone a little bit more charismatic, someone with a little bit more of a screen presence than Austin Butler, who's a fine actor, just not quite capable of personifying one of the most charismatic individuals of the 20th century, hands down, like one of the most enduring icons of all time in Elvis Presley. But either way, that's a whole different podcast. Shout out to you, Alex. Definitely not a huge Zack Snyder fan, especially his more recent work. But yeah, thank you so much for that. And another one, thank you so much, Alex. In college, many film students I knew only watch TV shows, not movies. Yeah, when I was in film school, I went to UMKC, which is the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And a lot of the film students there were, they were into Avengers movies and they were into a lot of TV shows, like you're saying, Alex. I was surprised by the lack of like true cinephiles. That sounds so fucking pretentious, but I was not expecting to be like the most, well-versed cinephile in the room. And I pretty much was the entire time. Just because I'd seen like fucking Ingmar Bergman movies and Jean-Luc Godard films, stuff like that. So that was definitely surprising to me. But not that that's a problem. It's not like to go to film school to want to be a filmmaker, you have to fucking have seen the entire filmography of Louis Buñuel or something. Like I'm not pretending like that's a necessary prerequisite, but I was expecting there to be more of that, and there was not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just shows what kind of time we're living into, because I also had the same experience. And I mean, my perception of the people I knew in my life that were really into film, I mean, it was like Gavin, and then I knew some like people tangentially, and then I knew people that were way older than me that had just seen all these movies. Like my fucking newspaper teacher in high school, him and I would always gab about movies because he was like a 90s video store generation kid. So he'd seen fucking everything, and he would put me onto like weird shit. Like he was the one that was like raving over the fucking top about what's that guy's name? He directed the movie we saw with like Adam Driver, where it was like part of musical Annette, I think. But this was the movie that he did before.
Leos Carax. Holy Motors.
Holy Motors. Yeah, he was like in love with that movie when I was like in high school, and he was anyway. That's how I found out about that. That was a crappy way to answer that question because I forgot what the fuck the movie was called. Sorry, guys. But anyway, so that was how I got most of my knowledge of it. But yeah, I mean, it's true that when we were in high school, what was dominating the cultural conversation? It was a lot of these high budget, like television shows, which in their own right are great, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about how the show Twin Peaks was hugely pioneering for television, and then masterfully it did it again. with the Twin Peaks, The Return really challenging what television could be. I would say that shows like The Sopranos definitely did that, where it gave, and then a decade after The Sopranos, you start to get a lot more variety in shows, and shows that had a lot of impact. And also just the fact that like Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead were such cultural forces for our generation. I think makes sense that a lot of people watched more TV, whereas the video store generation, that produce the directors like Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, Soderbergh, Linklater, Kevin Smith, all these guys, they grew up when television was like Full House, or like just kind of crappy, like Who Done It mysteries, or like MacGyver or something, where it was like not as serious of an art form as film, where now that distinction's really blurred. Some of the TV shows that come out now, like I know you really liked Big Little Lies when that came out, and you're tough to please when it comes to television. We both really liked Midnight Mass when that came out, and we're both tough to please when it comes to television. True Detective is another show that came to mind from when we were in high school that I was really obsessed with. So anyway, you start asking us about film and television, guys, and the show's never going to start. It's never going to start. I don't even think we've shouted out the patrons yet. This is we're 21 minutes and 36 seconds into this bitch, but you guys keep asking us about this, and yeah, it'll be quite something. I still need to check the score to Monday Night Football too. We haven't done our little sports guard thing, but if the Bengals can come through for me one night, then beat the Bills tonight, then the Chiefs will be back in the number 1 slot and potentially get a first round bye in the playoffs, which would be based. So anyway, shout out to that, and then we can move on.
Yeah, shout out to you, Alex. And yeah, we should just spend the first 30 minutes of the show talking about movies. Honestly, at this point, that's where things are headed. So apologies to everyone that's sitting here waiting for us to talk about the serious shit while we blather about cinema. But we really appreciate the super chats. We're always happy to talk about movies. We really do love talking with you guys about that stuff. And shout out to the patrons. As Zach said, we did forget to shout out the patrons. Huge shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate that. It's what keeps the show going. Wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. And the link's in the description. It's always going to be in the description if you're interested in supporting the show. Throw in a couple bucks our way on the monthly. Really appreciate that, guys. Like I said, links in the description. And we always like to start and end all of our live streams with a big shout out to our patron supporters, because of the fact that we wouldn't be able to do the show without you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Shout out to all of you guys for keeping the lights on in the Casa del Vanguard. We like to keep the heat on and not freeze to death in the winter. It's all because of you. Keeping us icicle free, keeping us unfrozen, and with plenty of spicy takes. So, yes, all of you lovely people. Really appreciate that. I also realized that the game's at 7:30 Central Time, not 7:30 Eastern. So we're rocking and rolling. We're still fresh in business. I'll holler that score out for everybody who doesn't care in the comments.
The Chiefs won yesterday, right?
Yeah, we'll probably win out the season. It was terrible that it was so close, because the Broncos are so fucking bad. They just fired their coach, what's his name? Russell Wilson. I almost said Russ Westbrook. That's a completely different sport. Russell Wilson has been just a goddamn disaster at QB for them. Just fucking ungodly bad. I think they are literally 4-12 is their record this year. Just horrible. And we still only won by like 3 points, because our fucking red zone offense is dog shit. It's just terrible right now. And I don't think we're going to have much of a fucking future in the playoffs if we can't get this shit together. It's fucking agonizing to watch us not convert and settle for field goals when we have the best quarterback in the league, the best tight end in the league. We have some serious running back talent right now. It's like there's no excuse for not getting it done in the red zone. But anyway, I'm again blabbering about shit that our audience isn't here to hear about. They want to know about why Vaush was canceled and why it could possibly have been over a good take. That's what you guys want to hear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, do you want to start with that story, Zach? I think this one's super interesting.
Yeah, this is a great story, because let me introduce this to you in a different way, because Gavin and I, we really loosely plan our shows together, right? We mostly just come with our own takes, like blah, blah. Sometimes we'll raw react to something, but for the most part, we have a little document that like has bullet points of what we all want to talk about. And I was like, yeah, do you want to throw this in? I just saw this interesting tweet from Vaush, and I think it's an interesting kind of broader conversation to have. Like, I thought Vaush made a great point completely outside of the drama. I was just like, oh, this will be cool. Maybe we'll throw it up for like 5 minutes and talk about how the left could be doing a better job at this, because I remember a couple of you guys in the chat were asking us the other day during our Q&A, and I think maybe even a little bit before that, we were getting a decent number of chats talking because of Andrew Tate. You know, he's such like a weird creep, but he like is able to relate to young men who like can't get dates and like don't know how to take care of themselves and like don't have a paternal presence in their lives or any kind of male relationships that are positive and those kinds of things, and how the left needs to do a better job of reaching out to those people. And I kind of shrugged it off. I was like, fuck, I don't want to be the guy that reaches out to these people. I just don't think I'm qualified to be the guy that reaches out to people. I'm not super friendly. Okay. Anybody that's met me from the show, they'll just come up and I'm like, you know what, dude, I'm just not that good around strangers. Like Gavin and I, we've got like 7 friends that we like to hang out with. And like I'll tell you what, yesterday I was at a brunch that I was doing with my homie, love her to death. We've been friends since 5th grade. Gavin knows Mariah, right? And I'm like, oh, how many people are going to come to this? Like if I do something like Max, like 5 or 6 people come over to the crib. She's like, I don't know, like 15, 20 probably. And I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, I'm not going to talk to any of these people. I'm going to hide in the kitchen the whole time and make French toast. But like, you know what I mean? So I'm definitely not the guy to deliver this kind of advice. I'm not the most social butterfly, right? Like Gavin and I have homies that are dudes that I'm like, oh, I could see you doing this. Like you're super friendly with everybody. You get along with everybody. Anyway, but it's true that there's a home for it on the left. So I'll give it my best shot whenever anybody asks me directly. And I think a guy like Vaush might actually be in a unique place to talk about something like this too, because he seems to care about this as an issue. It seems to be a kind of a primal or like a primary, part of his kind of his outreach, right? Which I think is important and I think it's good. And I think it harkens back to something that Michael Brooks used to say all the time, which was, you know, if you just let these right-wing spaces be right-wing spaces, like you're just giving up, right? All these people, like you need to go to YouTube. You know, you want to be a lumberjack and convert people who are right-wingers to the leftist cause. You want to be a lumberjack, you got to go where the forest is, right? So, you know, and that's why, you know, when we talk about like spaces like, you know, YouTube being predominantly right wing, that's why it's important to have channels like us on here. And I think in the long run, it'll be important to have us try and get a foothold on places like Rumble, which maybe we'll talk about later in the stream, which at this point are very much echo chambers for a very specific brand of politics, right? You know, people on the right would probably not call it right wing, and people on the left would definitely not call it left wing, right? We would probably call it right wing. You know, that's what succeeds over there. It's a very specific brand of left wing and right wing content that kind of thrives over there, but it's definitely gaining steam. And you know, so having some diversity over there wouldn't be bad. But all of this comes back around to say that Vaush made a very good point, an innocuous point, something that a person with a fucking half the IQ point that I do, which isn't very high, could have come to this conclusion and think, yeah, this is a pretty good idea. I cannot stress enough. Okay, so let's read the initial tweet really quick first. So, La Madre de los Gatos. No idea who this lady is. Gavin, do you know who this lady is?
Not sure. I think she's a lawyer. I checked her Twitter profile. She has like 30K followers. So not nobody, but not someone with a huge profile seemingly either. But not just like some random person.
Sure. Yeah, I figured it was like some account of some sort. So they write, men don't fall down, quote unquote, the alt-right MRA pipeline because the left isn't doing good enough outreach. They choose to subscribe to fascist ideology because they have an investment in maintaining their position in the social hierarchy, and the liberation of other groups threatens that. Now, this is like the most like cynical look you could possibly have on the problems that are you know, facing society, right? And it's funny because I saw this unrelated kind of tweet that I think makes sense here. It was a meme. So if anybody recognizes it, drag me. But the idea was, you know, it's like, oh, this is just those boys' nature, right? Like that's what she's saying. Like it's their nature to choose the fucking social hierarchy that best benefits that. And the, you know, meme had said, if you see an elephant in the circus juggling balloons, do you assume that that's the elephant's nature? And I think that that's a really important way to look at this, because you look at all of these, you know, social, societal conditions, these economic conditions, you know, all of the norms and pressures that we have around ourselves that develop people into and curate us really into these kinds of beings, right? These people, everything's hypersexualized, everything's about money. Women are the ultimate symbol of status. If you have, you know, beautiful women that desire you, then that's the ultimate like come up or whatever for like a bro or whatever. You know, society is not necessarily like saying, oh yeah, find love and stability and somebody that challenges you and uplifts you and is stable and in your life, right? That's not what we're constantly being fed. So of course we're outputting, like if that's what we're inputting these people into, obviously what we're outputting is like, you know, some bad hombres. And so Vaush comes in and says, I cannot stress enough how important it is to understand that 12-year-old white boys on Twitch are not being pulled into fascism because of some Machiavellian desire to preserve and expand their privilege. It's because the right talks to them and the left doesn't. And I would agree with that. But what do you think, Gavin?
So I have a lot to say about this. little conversation going on before we get to what Vaush said, because I do have a little bit of a issue with what Vaush said as well, although I mostly think he's correct. But just to address the substance of this first tweet from La Madre de los Gatos, saying that men don't fall down the alt-right MRA pipeline because the left isn't doing good enough outreach. They choose to subscribe to fascist ideology because they have an investment in maintaining their position in the social hierarchy, and the liberation of other groups threatens that. So I think that this is an absolutely ridiculous statement for a number of reasons. For one, just because you are a man, just because you are a young person that happens to have a penis, does not make it, the patriarchy is not your fault. Like, it's not my fault. It's not Zach's fault that society is structured in this way that overall benefits men and has historically resulted in the oppression of women. It's really not any specific person's fault. And to put that societal foundational issue at the blame, or to blame that on, random high school kids or, young men that have fallen down this alt-right pipeline, is absolutely ridiculous and goes entirely against a leftist understanding of individualism and versus societal issues. So, it's not any one specific person's fault. And to say that, men are choosing to, fall down this fascist ideology or, give into this fascist rabbit hole just because they love the patriarchy so much, I think that's ridiculous. Second of all, a lot of the reason why people do fall down this pipeline or this rabbit hole, especially of our generation or younger, is because our lives are increasingly spent online, and platforms like YouTube and other social media companies have algorithms which, for whatever reason, seem to prioritize this content, which can lead to people going down this rabbit hole without even really realizing it. Now, I remember around the time of 2015, right before Trump became president, that's when a lot of these alt-right channels really started blowing up. You guys might remember that the anti-SJW craze was in full effect. And I used to watch a lot of the skeptic community kind of YouTube, The Amazing Atheist, The Cult of Dusty, Chris Reagan, these kind of creators, Shoe on Head. And what started off as basically a community of people that were speaking out against organized religion and theism in general, seemingly overnight turned into a community of people that were alt-right signal boosters that were primarily talking about anti-SJW content. And as someone that, watched this transition happen again overnight, I saw a lot of people fall down this rabbit hole largely because they were consuming this kind of content, which morphed into a different genre of content. And then the algorithm kept promoting it onto everyone and kept forcing it onto everyone. There was even a period of time where I started to kind of believe what some of these people were saying. And I started to think that, anti-SJW concerns are something that are very valid and that we should be focusing our attention on. And then, the longer this went on, the more I started to realize that, hey, maybe actually these people are just profiting off of this, subject matter, which is easy to enrage people based off of. There's no easier way to make money on YouTube than constantly pissing off your audience and giving them more of a reason to be pissed off and come back and feel like they're invested in this fight against some sort of a culture or subculture. In this case, that culture was the culture of political correctness. And that's not to say that there aren't examples of annoying political correctness. But these channels and these creators, they take a grain of truth, like the fact that politically correct culture can be annoying. They use that grain of truth to then make their whole cause basically being anti-leftist, anti-feminist, anti-transgender, whatever. Their whole thing is basically to deny any social justice cause, to deny the very accurate points made by feminists and other social justice activists in order to just turn their audience against leftists in general. But again, it's sometimes a lot more subtle and sophisticated than that. And people don't even realize what's happening until it's too late, until they already are down that pipeline or down that rabbit hole. Again, in large part, thanks to what the algorithm does and the kind of content that it prioritizes and promotes. So luckily, like I said, I came to the realization that a lot of those content creators, people like Chris Reagan and, Sargon of Akkad, for example, people that originally pretended to be leftists, but then basically just turned into right wingers and alt-right signal boosters, Trump supporters, even in the case of a guy like Sargon of Akkad and others. Luckily, I realized what was happening, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to continue investing myself in this movement and this project, which is clearly at this point just cuddling up to the alt-right and grifting the right wing. But a lot of people, they don't necessarily I don't want to say they're dumber than I am. I'm not saying I'm all that intelligent myself, but a lot of people just don't realize what's going on. They don't understand what these content creators are doing. They don't understand that they're being grifted. And they keep going down this rabbit hole further and further and further to the point where they don't even really understand what's happened. And I think that's something that we need to address and talk about more so than, aren't these people horrible? Aren't these young men horrible? Don't they just want to uphold fascism? Don't they just want to uphold the social hierarchy that they don't even fully understand, rather than kind of looking at it in context and saying, well, let's look at how this happened and why this happened and how it can be prevented, rather than just placing the blame on individuals who in large cases are ignorant as to the context.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Because clearly there is a lot of money to be made selling this specific ideology, right? And we've seen the perversion that that has on people's politics. If you want to look at the most, transparent examples, you look at a guy like Dave Rubin, you look at a guy like Sargon of Akkad, right? People who just like go way the hell off the deep end. You look at a guy like a little chump like Jackson Hinkle, right? Just like blatantly, like just running off of a cliff in order to just chase whatever is going to be the most like rewarded clicks. And that happens. And then people have their own, like, however much they're willing to justify in their hearts their willingness to like satisfy this, because the algorithm does boost it, right? The algorithm does reward you massively. And that's a combination of two things. One, a lot of people are just fucking typing in that shit into the YouTube search engine. A lot of people just want to watch that kind of content where it's like SJW owned, like groomer destroyed, like, X, Y, or Z, lib dunked on, like, snowflake destroyed, like that kind of shit. That there's just a lot of fucking fingies that are typing that into the search engine. But then on top of that, there's just not as much youth targeted. I think that so you have the exact half of that, like that's totally true, and we should address that, and that gets completely left out. But then I also think the other thing is there isn't a ton of really clickable, really easy, and like designed for young men, Call of Duty live stream content, or like Overwatch lives. I don't know what fucking games kids play these days. I'm an old man now, but whatever these 12-year-olds are into now, TikTok, whatever. Like you need to get more lefties, engaging with that and doing that, because that's the other element. How do we beat that? Corporations and these nefarious fucks who are just, I don't even know what they believe and what they don't believe, right? Like it's so hard to tell what anybody believes and doesn't believe. I know a guy like Tim Pool, right? He pretends that he used to be a fucking liberal, and now he just goes down on all these rabbit holes. Trump's gonna win all 50 states. Remember that juicy one? Whatever, having Kanye West on, and even he was like, anyway. We all know how that game works. We just need to have more lefties that are, I think, doing a combination of things. One, calling out the structural impediments that we have that are creating these issues, like we're doing right now, talking about how YouTube promotes this content because it makes them money. Because the other thing is it's the tale as old as time, right? It's just they've been able to apply that same Fox News model, which used to be really attractive to like the older population in society, people who were at home a lot, people who were receptive to hearing people tell them shit through the TV, right? So it's like if the televangelist didn't get you and the TV, shopping network didn't get you, then maybe Fox News or CNN or something like that could get you. MSNBC could get you, and then you would have somebody to listen to and parrot the beliefs of or whatever. You know what I mean? I think that's just been able. They've figured out how to apply that to young boys, and they do it in the way that the same way that like Fox News will do that. Like you are a victim. Like they're taking this from you. Here's why you're not being given what other people were given. See how good it was for you in the past, and they like really curate the message to be both sympathetic to these people's plight, taking the worst examples of and there's just not a ton of that for the left wing, I feel like, or at least not as much. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see a guy like Hassan Piker be so successful, because when somebody does create a show that's modeled like that, I mean, here's the thing you got to give to Hassan Piker, right? Whether you love him or you hate him. I remember even Destiny gave him this props, and Destiny fucking hates Hassan Piker. He's like, that dude sat in the chair for 12 hours a day for months and months and months and months and months. And that's how he got where he is. I don't think I care about podcasting enough to sit in the chair for 12 hours a day for months and months. And I don't need that big an audience. I don't need a million subs. I fucking need to do other things besides sit in the chair and talk to you guys. I'm sorry. I love talking to you guys, but I don't need to do it 12 hours a day, like 300 days a year. Like that's so much time in your chair, in your bedroom. Like that's like I don't know, but he does it and he's always there. And he built this massive community of people. Right. And he is I know he doesn't have like the most like refined leftist politics ever, but he's a relatable guy and he's been massively successful on this front. I think Vaush has also done a good job of curating a younger audience of people that really care about this. And the other person that I'll holler out, that's a little, obviously a friend of the show. Shout out to Kyle. We'll get into him later. But I think Kyle has uniquely positioned himself as an authority on this because you, Gavin, and I can say that, people I know, young people, my little brother even, have had their political understanding of the world really modeled by Kyle. And even though by the time I got to Kyle, like I was already pretty much like a left-wing thinker, I certainly learned a lot listening to his videos as a young person and, absorbing some of his talking points and some of the facts that he had at the ready to justify his position on a lot of things.
Absolutely correct. I think bringing up Hassan is a great reason. That was the only area of disagreement I had with Vaush, is he says the right talks to them and the left doesn't. I do think there are people on the left that do attempt to fulfill this role and to have these conversations with young men. I think Hassan's one of those people, but I still understand Vaush's point entirely. So let's go down and see what else he says. He says leftists and progressives have absolutely no idea how to leftists and progressives have absolutely no idea how unnecessarily repellent they come off to so many people, and they get angry at the idea of being a more effective social movement because they don't want to share their social spaces with people who might have gone another way. He then goes on to say, leftists will write master's thesis on the effect of socioeconomic conditions on crime and then shrug when 10 million young men fall to fascism because their boy brains must just be innately fascist and they choose to be evil, and there's no way this could have been prevented. And I think that's very accurate too, and kind of hitting what I was talking about earlier, which is that it's not like any individual male's fault that society is structured the way it is. We can acknowledge the unfairness of society and how it's balanced more in favor of a patriarchal model and how that's resulted in the continued oppression of women and non-binary people and trans people and all that stuff. But that commentary and that reality cannot be used to bludgeon over the head young men who by no fault of their own were also born into this system. Yes, they have benefited from it, but no single person designed the system. No one gave their consent for the system being this way. We're all products of the same society, regardless of how much benefit you get from that. So I think it's very accurate what Vaush is saying here. And I don't think that people's brains are innately fascist. I don't think that men are necessarily inherently sexist or misogynist or want to uphold patriarchy. But we're all products of the society that we're born into. And that is important to acknowledge. So Kyle then chimes in, Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, and says, truly fascinating that anyone takes issue with, hey, let's try to do better outreach and change mind with good arguments. Anyone who thinks this is wrong isn't doing politics. They're doing niche subculture gatekeeping, which is a very accurate point from Kyle. And he's responding to the fact that for whatever reason, a lot of people took issue with Vaush's thread, with his point in the first place. And Kyle's basically coming in here and saying like, yo, all you said was let's do better outreach and change people's minds and hopefully, turn them into lefties. I don't see what the issue with that is. Clearly, neither does Kyle. And I think this is a specifically important point when we're talking about the internet and we're talking about internet subculture and internet culture in general, because as we were mentioning, this is a space. The online space is one in which the right wing has been specifically effective at infiltrating. Now, lefties do better in other areas, like, for example, college campuses infamously are hubs of left-wing thought and ideology. And that's good that the left has succeeded in infiltrating those spaces and making their ideology the dominant ideology in those spaces. There's some others that could possibly come to mind. I just thought of college campuses off the top of my head because that's a stereotypical example. But for whatever reason, a lot of people on the left think they're above internet discourse. They think they're too serious to engage in spaces like YouTube or Twitch or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. They simply feel like their politics are too serious for that, and they just reduce what's going on online to, just a bunch of people that need to go touch grass or something. I'm not sure. either way, what that has led to is a bunch of right wingers flooding these platforms and their ideologies flooding the discourse of said platforms. YouTube is the best example, in my opinion. That's where the most right wing thought kind of festers. And I think that, yeah, it is partially because the left has not done a good job with doing outreach and changing mind and engaging with some of these opinions, which they think are so vile, just apparently not vile enough to accurately and effectively rebuke.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I guess if you just take this is like insane, like neo-Hobbesian, right? Like all these men are like inherently evil, and it's like, okay, let's take this to its logical conclusion, right? It's like if these people are inherently evil, right? It's not society that's making them this way. It is just the way they are, right? Like we can't reach them. They are systematically choosing this. These 12-year-old boys whose brains aren't even halfway to developing fully are just so fucking already like the cake is baked. They can't be saved. They're just nefarious, women hating, capitalist bastards, right? Okay. Let's say that's true, right? Let's say that's true of all of us. We're all like that by the time we're 12. The few, kinks in the system produce some people who don't respond like that. Well, what are we going to do? Are we just going to round them up and get rid of every 12-year-old twerp? Like, what are we going to do? Oh, yeah, time for you guys to go. You're going to sleepaway camp. And then we just battle royale style them down to one. Like, what is going to happen? It's like, all right, the one supreme being, you get to live, but you got to stay here next time like Maximus from Gladiator, and you got to make sure all the other kids get whacked. All right? You'll be the curveball for next year, so we keep them all extra afraid. Like, what the hell do you do with all these people? That's the most defeatist attitude. Like, I have a defeatist attitude. Like, I all know that we're going to die from the fucking disaster of climate change unless every single scientist on Earth is wrong, right? Oh, so 99% of scientists on Earth are wrong. Okay, we're all going to die in that fiery disaster. That's fine. But I don't actually believe that every person that's a 12-year-old boy that goes down one of these rabbit holes can't be converted. Just because you don't actually know anything, you're stupid as shit when you're 12. Okay, and you basically just believe whatever the last person told you, right? Like, that's the thing about 12-year-old boys. This is the thing about most people. See, here's the thing. Most people are stupid as shit, and most men think like 12-year-old boys. So this is true of like absolutely most people. They just think and believe whatever the last effective argument they heard was. Anytime you say something to them, it'll sticks in there. They're like, yeah, that guy made some sense. And that's probably what I believe now. It's like most people aren't as like fucking entrenched in their beliefs as politically, at least, as most people who listen to this podcast, right? That's just not the way that it goes with everybody. So because it's so fucking easy to change a 12-year-old's mind. Like, you just flip it on its head, and maybe you won't win everybody, but as soon as you start like just open the bubble a little bit, it's like, yeah, well, we used to have it like this, and it was way better for me. And it'll be like, yeah, but do you know what else we had back then? We had a lot of like fucking segregation. We had like Jim Crow laws. Do you know what Jim Crow is? It's like, no, yeah, busing. You remember Martin Luther King? Do you want to stand with the guys that like Martin Luther King, or think that we should go back to before Martin Luther King came? No, I don't. Yeah, it's because that's the kind of conversations you have with like dumb 12-year-old white boys, right? They really like they just I don't know. They nothing sticks to them. This fucking hate mongering ideology doesn't stick to them. That's why they have to fucking have it fed to them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then it starts to sick. And then when you're like 22 and you start to get really pissed off at the world and you need real excuses for why your life's not going better, then this starts to really cement, and then you might go shoot up a Walmart or something. But when you're 12, it's just water off a duck's back. None of this is like sticking with you, I don't think. So I think we actually do. We've got like a good 10 years right there to try and make some counter arguments, to try and walk some people back from that bridge, right? Until we can get some reasonable gun laws passed in this country. And then even then, I still think it's good work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so accurate. 100%. And shout out to you, Nicholas. Thank you so much for the $4.99. What do y'all think of Rob Drydeck being the latest health, wealth, and wellness guru? Lots of young fans through ridiculousness to influence. I actually don't know who Rob Drydeck is. Is that the guy from Ridiculousness? Isn't that the like show where they look at funny videos or something?
Yeah, it's crazy because I hella grew up with this guy. So this is like one of those weird, like, you were really into like the new atheist movement, but my whole life I was really like, did you watch Rob and Big at all, or like Rob Dyrdek's Fantasy Factory? So Rob Dyrdek is a really interesting guy because he basically dominated the airwaves of MTV and MTV2 for anybody that watched a lot of cable television from the year like 2000 2005, 2006 to like 2016, like that 10-year run, like that prime 10-year run from when I was like 8 to 18, this dude was everywhere. So when I was a kid, I used to watch Robin Big with my dad, and I would watch by myself too. It was just this show where it was like he was this superstar skateboarder, right? And he actually wasn't ever really that good at skateboarding. Here's the first marketing bait and switch, but he was really good at designing sneakers. So he was a big part of why DC shoes blew up. I don't know if you remember when we were kids, DC skateboarding shoes were like all the fucking rage. And he was really a big part of that. And then he leveraged that, and he invented Street League, which is another like really big skateboarding competition that he got going on. And like, so guys like Nigel Houston, that's how they got discovered. Anyway, huge figure in the skateboarding world, but also just in the like normie, like pop culture world. I didn't know that he was a health, wealth, and wellness guru now, but it kind of makes sense because I did watch a couple of clips on him. This is how much I like this guy. I'll listen to clips from podcasts that I would never ever click on that I like in like actual like thinkingness. I hate the concept of, but I'm like, oh, Rob Dyrdek talking about his friendship with Big while shooting Robin Big. Like, sign me up for the next 12 minutes. Like, I'm a gullible ass clicker like everybody else, right? So I'm watching him talk to like Logan Paul or something like that on Impulsive. I don't know, whichever. And he's like, you know, and he's like, well, you know, blah blah blah. And it is funny that he's trying to, because he was talking a lot about like how he got rich and how he like made his fortune and everything. But all I can think back to is like when there was the episode of Robin Big, and he's trying to get Big to lose weight, and so he takes him to get like fucking hypnotized, and he's like, trust me, bro, I owe everything to this hypnotist. When I was broke, bro, I went and hit this guy up and I got hypnotized with a vision for success, and that's what we're gonna do for you, bro. We're gonna get you hypnotized. And I'm like, this guy a fucking health and wellness guru? Not a stretch. He's the man for it. He believes in hypnotism is what gave him all of his wealth and whatnot. That's not surprising, but I definitely think that it makes sense that you would use this clout that you had with people of a very specific generation. You know, now they're like in their early 20s, and it's like, yeah, here's how you get rich, bro. I got rich, bro. Like that kind of content is going to be like low hanging fruit for a guy like him.
Fascinating. I'll have to look more into that, Nicholas. Thanks for the super chat. Thanks for letting us know. I am like vaguely familiar with this Rob guy, but not nearly to the extent that you are, Zach. So I'll definitely have to do more research into that. But thank you so much, Nicholas, for the comment and for the super chat. And yeah, to follow this up, Vaush also tweeted this out a couple days ago, which might have led to this other thread we just went over. He said, getting the feeling some leftists are actually okay with the increasing popularity of incel/neo-chauvinist ideas because it confirms their pre-existing biases against men, which is definitely an interesting take that I think I largely agree with, given some of the responses to his other thread that we just talked about. I think this is specifically true. And I think what we all need to understand while being against this incel and neo-chauvinist content and this new wave of, you know, misogyny and the likes of Andrew Tate and all of these like manosphere idiots. Something we need to keep in mind is that the fact that young men are buying into it so easily and being propagandized by these fools is also itself a symptom of toxic masculine culture. Men are also victims of toxic masculine culture. Men are also victims of this patriarchal mindset, which poisons us to believe these ridiculous and inaccurate things about the roles we should inhabit in society. Again, it's not just women that suffer because of this ideology, it's men too. The fact that a guy like Andrew Tate can go out here and prey on these societal norms, so to speak, or the way that society thinks men should act, and you know, amplifying the worst of those traits is very bad for men too. It leads to worse mental health outcomes. It leads to men feeling like they can't express emotion in the way they should be able to. Yada yada yada. The list goes on and on. It leads to relationships being harder. So I think that's what we all need to grapple with before just blaming anyone or blaming men as a whole. We need to grapple with the societal implications of a patriarchal, toxic masculine society and how that affects everyone in a negative way, and how to hopefully prevent it by countering and destroying these ideas.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the same broader argument that we always try and make here on the Vanguard, which is that when we're reaching out to people about these things, it's important. Like the worst way that you can approach somebody about the history of this country and all the bad things we've done is to try and like layer it in this, like, oh, this is your fault, like you fucking did this, right? And that's kind of how you can always tell like a lousy, like lazy, cheap leftist is somebody who just wants to like collect brownie points barking at people, right? They're not interested in changing hearts and minds. But in reality, every left argument, and why I think it would be like a salient argument to people, is that it's like you're not reaching out to these 12-year-old boys and saying it's your fault that the world is like this. You're saying, hey guys, here is how you are forced to live because of your surroundings. Here is like, when you started your video game, right? There's always like a spawn point, right? You spawned into a hyper-capitalist patriarchal society. Like, how are you going to navigate that and still be a fucking hero protagonist instead of a villain protagonist, to put it in 12-year-old boy terms, right? Like, how are you going to proceed to be a good guy, right? To be the knight in shining armor, whatever fucking fictional version of yourself you want to be, like, a nobleman or fucking I don't know, whatever you're talking about in this fantasy parable I am, building for you guys. The reality is that you have to say, hey, okay, here is what the world is trying to tempt you into doing. It wants you to agree to this system of oppression of others. It wants you to believe inherently that the world will never change. It wants you to believe that the suffering of the global South is worthwhile because that's just how it is. And in order for you to have your iPhones and for you to get X, Y, and Z at the price that you're willing to pay, we have to subjugate large swaths of the earth in order to convenience us, right? It says we always have to be at war. It says X, Y, and Z. It says that we, dominating women and consuming them like fucking commodities, and always having the newest, the sexiest, the brightest, whatever, and that they are your like items for possession or whatever, or worse, and the more nefarious ones. I've even seen guys that are starting to like fuck like that. It's like, oh yeah, how many like virgins have you fucked? Which is just a recipe for rape. Okay, if you're like 30, don't you dare be out here trying to fuck virgins like that. That'll get your ass thrown in jail justifiably, and then you'll get to really experience the horrors of rape firsthand. So like that was where it got really nefarious. It wasn't just like how many dates can you get, it was like start fucking virgins. And I was like, Jesus Christ, maybe we have a moral obligation to start weighing in on this on our show, because these people are getting extremely grisly and nefarious. So what you do is you say, this is the society that is trying to sell all this crap to you. You don't have to buy it. You can actually be a good person. You can fight against this, right? This is the Jedi side. Now, do you want to go be a Sith Lord for the capitalist fucking sleazeballs? No, I don't think so. Anyway, another clumsy narrative for the 12-year-old boy, or analogy, excuse me. But this is, again, shout out to you, Christina. We're 1 hour in and I'm like, man, I need my water. Like my lips are getting fucking, I don't know how these other people go for so long. 12 hours on the mic. I'm like, no. But then again, the guys that do stream, like, they don't give a fuck while they're streaming. They'll do anything. Blah, 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 blah. We at least try and keep it like lively and tight for the 2 to 3 hours that we're on for.
Yeah, maybe if I got like an Adderall prescription or something, I would be doing those marathon streams. God, could you guys imagine me doing the show on fucking Adderall? I'd be getting off on so many tangents. It would be insane. Can't do that. Anyway, yeah, definitely interesting conversation. Are you ready to move on to our next story, Zach? If you want to intro the Kevin McCarthy speaker bid story.
Oh yeah, I did also just want to shout out our super chat from Christina. So that's why I was referencing the duration. Yeah, she says that's not difficult for Hassan, just like his uncle. He loves the sound of his own voice. Yeah, look, it is a unique skill, and trust me, I'm not the best at it now. I've definitely gotten better. If you listen to our old podcast, you'll see how many and uhs and blah 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 stuttering that was going down between me and Gavin. But we've mostly gotten a lot better at that. At least it's something that I really try hard to pay attention to and make sure that it's not like an aggravation for everybody. But even then, it still crops up sometimes. That being said, if you're talking for 12 hours like Hassan Piker, like it's bound to happen. But anyway, it is a really unique skill. Another guy that really impresses me with the duration that they're able to just like talk by themselves is Kyle, because that dude, I think he records all of his things like back to back to back, and it's just him going off to himself and alone in a room, no live audience to engage with or interact with at all. It's just a completely different ball game. So yeah, shout out to those dudes. Gavin and I rely so hard on each other and the chat to keep ourselves fed with talking points and things to react to and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Christina. And yes, he does love the sound of his own voice. Although I think you could say that about most streamers. You know, to be a streamer, to be a commentator in general, you kind of have to be in love with the sound of your own voice. I mean, to have to be like, you know what I should do for a job? Talk, and other people should listen. I mean, yeah. By the very nature of the gig, it does lend itself to that. But thank you so much, Christina. Really appreciate the 4.99. Thank you also, Kevin. Really appreciate that, Kevin. Young women are going through similar issues as young men, in my opinion. Example, FDS and femcells. Women be lacking positive male role models. End the gender wars. I can't say I'm as familiar with that side of the equation. I'm not for sure what the FDS stands for. I don't know what femcell. I mean, I guess femcells is incels, but women. But I'm sure that is accurate, Kevin. I'm sure that is accurate. I would need to do a little bit more investigation. The reason why I know more about the manosphere stuff is because I'm a man, so I just see more of it. But I'm sure that is the case as well. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, not to sound like I'm copying out completely. Like maybe I guess I should definitely be paying more attention to issues that are exclusively impacting women. But yeah, I mean, most of what Gavin said is exactly what I'm about to say. Like we target our commentary towards that because it's kind of like, hey, you got to get your own team together first. Like I'm not trying to go out here and be like lecturing women about this. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to fucking struggle under a patriarchal society as a woman. I do have a little bit of an idea about what it's like to do so as like a straight dude in the Midwest, and I try and share that perspective with you guys way more than probably some people would like it, but a decent amount. So yeah, I mean, look, Gavin and I never discriminate. Like we have a very heterodox Vanguard community. Like I'm actually extremely proud of how many women are in the Vanguard community, because if you look at YouTube, there are not a lot of shows where you can shout out like a bunch of your regular listeners and have them be women. And that is true of the Vanguards. This is not like an all guy channel. This isn't like a bro fest over here. This is a very inclusive, collective of different individuals with different thoughts and ideas and also different genders. So we try and keep that philosophy here. And shout out to you, Kevin, for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. Also, shout out to you, Sam, for the $5. Do you guys still do call-in? No. Short answer, no, we do not do call-in anymore. Had a fun time over there, but the funds dried up.
Yeah, absolutely. They wanted us to do it for like way less money, and we were like, we would rather just do our own thing. Like they were like, we're not about to exploit ourselves under labor practices for some third party. This is not going to happen at the Vanguard. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much, Sam. Really do appreciate the $5. Thank you so much. LOL, I gotta stop doing a shot every time Gavin says really appreciate. I get too drunk. That's funny.
Just don't switch to 100%.
And absolutely, yeah. Either way, were you wanting to intro this story about Kevin McCarthy?
Sure. Yeah, we're finally here. It's time. It's time again. Kevin McCarthy. So this is an interesting one. I was thinking about this morning because this is one of those unique instances where you're going to be hearing a lot from the people whose bread and butter is aren't the libs terrible? See how ineffectual and terrible the libs are. And it's like, I'm never here to disagree with those guys. I'm never here. Or I mean, I am sometimes here to disagree with them, but not on that principle, right? Not on the, the libs are feckless, disastrous losers, right? But today is one of those days where they have a lot to flaunt and a lot to celebrate. And one of the common refrains is because the right wing and the Republican Party typically does exercise like a little bit of resistance to the political leadership of their party, right? Because at the end of the day, like all politicians, Republicans know that they're only really beholden to their fucking corporate overlords, right? As long as they can keep getting money from lobbyists and money from oil executives and whoever the fuck else, right? Then they can raise enough money and they can go to war with Republican leadership, and they'll be like, well, look at what Rand Paul's been doing for all this time in Kentucky, and look at what, I'm trying to think of another Republican that bucks orthodoxy every once in a while. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she's got under the wing of Donald Trump. I was thinking Mitt Romney. He's got enough money and name recognition. Sometimes he'll buck the Republican establishment for some reason, right? You do see that, right? And I remember I used to have a talking point that somebody poked a hole in, and because I was talking about how, you see a lot of resistance to the Biden administration, not on principle, but because he is the Republican, or he's the Democratic president and they're Republican, so they want to see him fail. And I think by and large that's true. But the pushback I got when I made that case was they looked up how many no votes there were for the military bill under Donald Trump, and there were actually a decent amount of Republicans. So, like, they will actually put their foot down on some shit. Whereas the Democrats, just the feckless, spineless, no do nothing fuckers that they are, they just never do anything. They just roll over in the mud and say, "What can we do? Like, it's fucking irritating. It's maddening as hell. And so anyway, you're going to be hearing a lot from those people. So Gavin and I thought we would give you the proper framework for how to operate on these issues. We already basically laid it out to you. Right. The squad doesn't have the protection of like raking in a fuck ton of lobbyist money. They only have donations from people like us. But they are still trying to gain the approval of the Democratic leadership. So that costs them money from us, because I don't know about you guys. I'm not sending any money to the squad right now. And I don't recommend that you guys are either, because it's a fucking waste. Right. So they're floating that. And then they now know that all the money that they are getting is from more of like a suburban class and not from a working class. Right. Because they've let people down. There hasn't been enough urgency, X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's fine. But basically they're just too beholden to the Democratic Party because they don't have the funding and then the lobbyist interest and the corporate backing in order to go to war with them. And now they don't have, and then they were too afraid to just go to war with them, with the people, right? Like they if your choice is like corporations, the people, and the Democratic Party, the squad 86 corporations, which we asked them to do, and then they just ran under the Democratic Party wing instead of fighting with the people, which was the third option. Anyway, Republicans are doing all this under the blanket protection of lobbying. So no, they're not better or hashtag more based than the Democrats. They're just vile in their own way. They're feckless in their own way. But anyway, they at least did put their foot down and said that in spite of the concessions that the Republican Party leadership had offered, many Republicans held out from saying that they would confirm Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker in the House. And we can look at those reps in an article that I've got here if you want me to pull it up, Gavin, or I don't know if you've got it over there.
Oh, I do have it. Yeah, I can pull it up right now. Here we go.
What do you
Kevin
think?
Oh, yeah. Well, just in case anyone's not familiar with all the context, let's go over this article real quick. The final hurdle to Republican Kevin McCarthy's years-long quest to secure the Speaker's gavel grew even more formidable on Monday, as a sizable group of House colleagues from his own party said they were not yet ready to support him. The 9 Republican rebels made the announcement after the California congressman made a series of concessions on Sunday to try to shore up the support of conservative hardliners ahead of Republicans assuming control of the U.S. lower chamber on Tuesday. McCarthy can only afford to lose 4 votes from his party's slender majority if he is to win the election for Speaker. That will be among the first order of business for the new Congress. The right-wingers have demanded a change in House rules to make it easier to topple the Speaker and increase representation for fringe members on committees. While the group's statement acknowledged there had been some steps forward, it said McCarthy's messaging during a Sunday evening conference call and in a summary sheet obtained by Punchbowl News left them uncertain of exactly what he was offering. So this is very interesting, and also, getting some deja vu, of course, because one of the things we started this channel talking so much about was force the vote. Basically, when Nancy Pelosi was up for Speaker in 2018, a lot of people were urging, or was it 2020 rather, a lot of people were urging House progressives, the left flank, the Justice Democrat wing, to kind of do what the Freedom Caucus is now doing by holding her speakership hostage in order to extract some concessions. Now, as you guys remember, all of the progressives, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Pramila Jayapal, etc., they all folded. They all voted for Nancy Pelosi without getting a single goddamn concession, without moving the Overton window whatsoever, without securing any committee positions for the squad members who, could have used those. Sorry, Zach just pieced out. I'm guessing there's something wrong with his internet. Having some internet issues in general today, so sorry about that, guys. But yeah, let's throw this tweet up on screen, actually from Kim Iverson, who's someone that I typically disagree with quite a bit. Looks like Zach Speck. But yeah, don't always agree with Kim Iverson. But this is a very accurate point to make. She says, it's amazing to see a handful of conservatives hold Kevin McCarthy's speakership dreams hostage the way progressives like AOC refuse to with Pelosi. Again, don't agree with Kim Iverson on everything, but this point is absolutely correct. These conservatives, these Freedom Caucus members, are basically proving that what we were asking the squad members to do a couple of years ago is totally possible. Totally possible. They're doing it right now with Kevin McCarthy. There's no reason the squad members couldn't have done the same thing with Nancy Pelosi. And let's not get it twisted. As you said, Zach, in no way does that mean that on policy the Republicans are better. No, they're not. But what it does prove is that many of the House GOP members have balls, unlike what we've seen from the left wing members in the Democratic Party. We've seen a willingness to challenge leadership, to challenge their party's leaders in a way that AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, Ro Khanna simply cannot do. And I have a variety of theories as to why this is, chief among them being that right-wing congresspeople, right-wing politicians, they're so used to getting shit on, usually for valid reasons, by the mainstream media, that they're no longer afraid of that backlash from the mainstream media. They're not afraid of getting called whatever by the New York Times. They're not afraid of getting, insulted and dragged by mainstream sources, because that happens to them all the time. Again, usually for very valid reasons. However, people like AOC, people like Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna, they don't want to deal with the backlash from the mainstream press, from the liberal press. There's nothing they fear more than having bad press, than people talking shit on them on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is why they go along to get along and play ball with the leadership of their own party, which is why they refuse to challenge Nancy Pelosi or Democratic Party leadership, including Joe Biden, chief among them, in a serious way. Do you think there's any validity to that theory, Zach?
Oh yeah, I mean 100%, right? And not only that, do they have the lobbying funds to put out whatever message that they want to, which is 100% accurate. They also they just have their whole base already hates the New York Times. Their whole base already hates the mainstream media. They hate the Washington Post. That's part of their whole bread and butter, right? Is don't trust the media. That's going to be basically irrelevant to them, because for the longest time the media was just ruthlessly critical of the Republican Party by and large. Why? Because most of the people who write for them are not Republicans, right? That's the way that it goes. They're liberal cheerleaders, and that's true, and that's of no benefit to the left, right? They try extra hard to squash Bernie Sanders because they were like, holy shit, this guy actually might relate to our readers. You know what I mean? So that's the main reason why. Again, the people who read the New York Times are the people that AOC needs to fundraise off of, because she abandoned the actual working class, right? She no longer is the embodiment of the working class. She's more of like a Vogue magazine kind of figure. And as a result of that, like I said, there's nobody to protect her now other than the suburbanites or the Vogue reading class of the people who think the New York Times is like the paper of record.
Absolutely. Also, shout out to you, Christina. Thank you so much for the $9.99. There is a reason the boys get influenced by the right. They're already feeling lonely, sad, and isolated. The adults in their life are failing them. But I think that's correct, Christina. And also, it goes back to what I was saying about how toxic masculine culture, patriarchal culture, it negatively affects everyone, men included, because it gives us these false gender roles and standards which many people don't live up to or can't live up to, and then it does lead them to be lonely, sad, and isolated, like you're saying, Christina. So yeah, men are also the victims of toxic masculine culture, maybe not to the same extent as women, but I think that's a very important part of the conversation to discuss as well. And thank you so much for the super chat.
Yeah, that's another big thing that we've always kind of talked about on the show. And I think it goes back to one of the chief theories that I have about why we have some of these problems. And I noticed it really acutely during COVID-19. I think it became just super transparent to everybody. But it had been manifesting long before that. The fact that there is a absence, there's a lack of fucking, I don't know, male to male contact, right? There's the lack of people who have good homies that are, actually challenging them intellectually, actually making them have thoughtful conversations, right? Like I always think about, like, Gavin, how rare is it, do you think, for two dudes that have been homies for fucking, I don't know, however long we've been friends for, since fucking fifth grade, basically, right? To sit back and have like 15, 18 hours of like legitimate conversation with each other every week. Like that is very rare. It's super rare, right? Like we're definitely lucky that we have that like ingrained into our lives. But you feel like there is just a real dearth of that in what people can get. And there's also people are looking for like male role models, like people they can look up to talk about like how they can live their lives, how they can be successful, right? Because the other thing that I think is really a problem that the left needs to address in a meaningful way is, and this still fucks with me, even though I talk about this for a living. It's like the culture we live in is so obsessed with the concept of success. How do I become successful? This like vague entity that's always escaping you. It's almost like ethereal at this point, and it's just like this abstract incentive, like, oh, I need to achieve success. Oh, be successful, be like me, and that is success, right? And that's nefarious as fuck because it's nondescript. You can never attain it. The bar is always moving away. You're like a greyhound at a dog track chasing a fucking bone that's running away from you, right? Like that's that, but that creates a hole in all of us that we're looking to fill. We're looking to fill that hole that we dream about success filling for ourselves because we just prescribe any of our own unhappiness in the solution, or we prescribe it as a cure for any of our unhappiness that we have for any myriad of ways. That's why it never fulfills itself. It's an empty vacuum. And if you tell people that I will give you success, and these people all already believe that success will cure whatever emptiness that they have inside them because of the patriarchal, capitalist, hyper-consumeristic society that we live in, then they're going to flock to that, right? So I think that's another really big part of the conversation here, and that's why guys like Joe Rogan have just taken off catastrophically, because Joe Rogan couldn't have planned for this, but he was like the perfect guy to be the voice for this because he was generally famous enough. He'd hosted Fear Factor and he'd hosted UFC. So people were like, oh, that's a famous guy. So he's got some credibility because people think he's rich, and then he works out all the time. So he's like textbook alpha male. He looks fit. A lot of people struggle with like their weight and obesity. So that guy becomes like somebody that they can look up to. He's really into giving health advice. He's really into talking about how you can conquer your life, how anybody could just do like kettlebells in their basement, no matter if you have nothing. This is how you make your life better. Do X, Y, or Z self-improvement. And he basically just redesigned and reformulated self-help and self-improvement, the whole like Tony Robbins shit for this like new generation of men, and it hit at the perfect time because again you've got this emptiness, you've got this idea that success, accumulation of wealth, maybe like not worrying, because so many people like their whole life is just worrying about money. Like, can I pay the bills? Can I do X, Y, and Z? So the thought of having that relief alone, like the amount of like fucking cortisol or whatever the stress chemical is in your brain that would just be alleviated just from not that. So they all dream and fantasize about that all day long. And then they're listening to these guys like, trying to tell them, oh yeah, just be a little bit more like me and then it'll all work out for you, which is, again, it goes back to the Rob Dyrdek thing where it's just like, you have like a little bit of fucking clout for something that you did, right? Like he was on TV and now it's like, okay, now I'm going to tell you, like, if you live like me, if you really hustle hard, like I hustle hard, right? If you really get yourself up and conquer your inner bitch or whatever the fuck they're saying to people, right? And get after it and get mean, then you're going to be like me and you're going to have 16 houses and like $100 million or whatever the fuck, right? And that's because we haven't, as a left, set aside and like promoted a new value set, which is like, hey, that's actually just, Jeff Bezos is still trying to make himself successful so that he can fill that void. Like you're never going to, right? Orson Welles never filled that void, if he fucking ate himself to death, that famous analogy, right? Like, you know what I mean? So I just think that, the left has to promote like an idea like, hey, actually what you should be valuing is community, friendships, valuing relationships, the idea that you're carving out your own, space in this world where you're doing good, you're fulfilling yourself, and hopefully you're helping other people fulfill themselves along the way. You're not leaving the earth worse than you got here. You're leaving it better. Like these kinds of values actually make you at peace with yourself. And the left could be doing a way better job at making that an offering that as a worldview than it's being done now, for sure.
Very well said, Zach. 100% agreed. And thank you so much, Christina. Really appreciate that $9.99. Also, shout out to you, Tool Droid, coming through with a generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, man. What specific policies do the right even stand for these days? All I hear is anti-woke, anti-trans, anti-LGBT garbage talking points. Sad that's their focus. Yeah, this is something we've been talking about for a while. And not to give too much credit to a guy like Donald Trump, who himself is a massive, massive culture warrior. Don't get me wrong. But it did seem like there was an opportunity back in like 2016 or something for the right wing to kind of refocus some of their priorities and talking points around some of the populist messaging of a guy like Donald Trump. And again, don't get me wrong, Donald Trump was a phony and a total faux populist, but it is true that some of the things he was talking about, like, for example, ending the wars and ending the trade deals and ending our relationship with China as far as how everything is built there. These are serious policy substance issues that did resonate with a lot of voters. Of course, we also had the very insidious xenophobic talking points about immigrants and the border. So I'm not trying to minimize the harm he wrought, but it is true that for a second there, it looked like, hey, maybe the GOP is realizing that they would be better off if they focused on some more populist, substantive issues. Like I said, ending the wars being a big one that appeals to people across the partisan spectrum. But since then, it seems like they've totally reverted into just talking about culture war issues, going back to like the 2012 era homophobia, arguing against gay marriage, making the groomer rhetoric and anti-trans rhetoric forefront in their agenda and discourse, especially in this most recent midterm elections. It really seemed like their main issues of focus were trans swimmers and the groomers and all of this crazy culture war nonsense that really did not resonate with your average normie American who just wants inflation to stop and for the economy to get better. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Tool Droid. There are very few specific policies that the right does stand for, other than the ones like cutting taxes for the rich, which most of the politicians won't be honest about. But yeah, as far as what they actually stand for, it is mostly culture war garbage.
Oh, absolutely. And then the tangential policies that they focus on will be like, these kids are soft these days, right? Like, they're spoiled. They don't want to work hard. They don't want to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And then occasionally you'll get into the, the kids are too fat and video game addicted. And they don't want to sign up for the military now. The military can't recruit anymore. Blah, blah, blah. Those are like some tangential ones, but you're right. It's all anti-woke, anti-LGBTQ community, right? Groomers, the drag queens, yada, yada, yada. Oh, the election was stolen. That's another one that they love to talk about. Oh, they stole the election, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, there's not a lot of cutthroat, actual good policies that have come from the right. I think that honestly, that might be the roadmap for DeSantis and why I think he actually has and why I've started to think he might actually have a better shot is because he can actually point to some concrete shit that he did as governor. Like, I'm not saying they were good things, right? But he can point to concrete shit that he did as governor, right? Like, he'll be able to say, like, oh, when the hurricane happened, like, we did X, Y, and Z. And like, oh, when X, this shit that's already in his stump speeches now. Whereas, Donald Trump really doesn't have that much to say. Like, he didn't really accomplish much of what he'd promised to. So now he can't really just go out and be like, oh, this time we're actually going to do it. Like, I know he pretends that he built the wall. He's like, we built like X, Y, and Z amount of wall along the border. We built that wall. It's a glorious wall. It's a beautiful wall. They hate the wall, but we love the wall. Why do we love the wall, folks? Because it keeps the bad people out and the good people in. And that's what we like, or whatever the fuck he says about it, right? So anyway, I think that the emptiness of their fucking politics is another reason why they lost so many seats in the fucking, midterms. We've talked about that ad nauseum pretty much. Did you give any thought at all, Gavin, to the fact that we didn't talk about this? I think it happened a few days ago, but Trump teased the like third party by, I think he like posted an article on Truth Social that was, or like, I don't know, like re-truthed it. I read an article where it was like posts an article urging him to run third party. I don't have a Truth Social, so I never look at anything on there from the source. But do you think he'd actually run third party? Do you think he's just really bummed and pissed off about how little media attention he's generating, given the fact that he announced way too early for presidency and nobody really seems to give a fuck about him? So he's trying another like big splash. What if Trump does this? And still, really, the media is not biting. People just don't give a fuck. People are all Trumped out. We thought that would never happen. People still like Marvel movies. People still like all that shit. But Trump came and went. So what do you think about it? Do you think he'll have to run third party? And if he does lose to DeSantis in the primaries, do you think he will?
I could totally see it being the case. Trump does not give a fuck about the Republican Party. He clearly does not give a fuck about the Republican Party winning elections. If he did, he wouldn't consistently endorse terrible candidates just because they kissed his ass more than the other better candidates that are more electable. So clearly he does not care about the Republican Party. And clearly his pettiness is king and takes massive precedence over any sort of policy, agenda, or anything of the sort. So yes, I totally see that happening. Trump's entire politics is basically just based around his own narcissistic whims. So for that reason, yeah, if he feels like he gets cheated in the primary, which every time he loses an election, it's because he feels like he gets cheated. So he's going to feel like he got cheated. He's going to feel like the establishment witch hunt prevented him from winning. And for that reason, yeah, I totally see him being resentful and petty enough to do it. Now, the only thing that might stop him from doing that is something that we discussed a little bit on the podcast the other day, Zach. We have looming investigations against him. And you actually brought this up. You're like, what if the Republicans, just in order to get rid of this guy, kind of joined hand with the Democrats and said, hey, fuck this guy, throw him in jail, get his ass in jail. If he really challenged the duopoly in a serious way by running as a third party candidate and risking the Republicans losing because of it, I could see them kind of joining the Democrats and being like, nope, your time is up, bro. You're going to jail for a litany of crimes that he has absolutely committed. It's not like they'd have to make something up or manufacture some scandal. There's plenty of there. So he might have to worry about that if he really were to challenge the establishment in that serious of a way.
Okay, I'm so glad you remembered that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, he could fuck himself so bad it would be one of the most hilarious self-owns ever, where he just really just decide, he's like, hey, guys, Republicans, I'm going to run third party. And then they're like, hey, well, we're all going to vote for you to go to fucking jail now. Good luck. Have fun with the FBI and their criminal case against you. We're going to let them lock you up for 15 years. Okay, we're going to put you in Attica fucking prison. Yeah, how are you going to like that, guy? You're going to get the Weinstein treatment. You're going to fall from grace, guy. How do you like them apples? No? How about you sign this piece of paper that says you'll shut the fuck up and shake whoever's hand, wins the Republican nominee, say he's going to make America great again, and then you're going to keep your ass out of jail. How about them apples? I think that's the strategy that has to happen. That's how you play hardball in American politics. That's how you do it. That's how you serve a shit sandwich. That's how you say, do this, motherfucker, or else. You know, that's what I would be doing if I was Ron DeSantis' campaign manager. I would be like, get everybody on the fucking phone now, because they are all evil, maniacal, Machiavellian bastards. That's what you have to be a fucking campaign manager. Don't tell my sister I said that. But that's how you win. Oh, shout out to you, Boeing. You know what, Boeing? I was actually thinking about you. I was thinking about you the other day because the fucking airlines have been so fucked. It's been disastrous. And I was like, oh my God, I bet you this is hell for pilots. But I mean, fortunately for you guys, pilots, you know, I know you guys say thank you for coming on and like wave at the end of the flight, but you don't get to have to deal with most of the like just erratical, like fucking crazy bad behavior from people who are justifiably pissed off, but it's not your fault. You know, like you're not the executives running Southwest and doing stock buybacks and, you know, laying people off, right? And neither are the fucking, you know, hardworking people that you get to interact with at the airport. So don't pull a Cenk Uygur and don't scream at anybody because your flight gets moved. We can react to that video later because 'tis the season. But anyway, shout out to you, Boeing. You've been on our mind. Happy New Year. Still waiting for those who argued against force the vote to show us their non-existent alternate strategy. Always looking forward to AOC and others to start tweeting, it's now time for Medicare for all. Yeah, because that's when they need a fundraise again, bud. It's when they're like, oh, yeah, it's fucking election season again. You know what I mean? Let me put out some goodwill to the people that I can still fucking con into sending me money. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Shout out to you, Boeing, again. Happy New Year, and hope you're doing all well. You know, at the old orifice.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bowen. Really appreciate that. Super generous of you. And yeah, I am too, man. I'm also still waiting for some people even that I respect, you know, commentators and channels that I like, who argued for no reason against force the vote. Let's be honest, just because it was Jimmy Dore's idea. And, you know, at this point, Zach and I are not exactly fans of Jimmy Dore, but if the guy has an idea that's good and he promotes it, that doesn't make that idea inherently bad just because he's the one that's promoting it, right? And I do feel like there was a lot of childishness surrounding the whole force the vote debate because of that, and people refusing to admit that it was a good idea as a result. So yeah, thank you so much, Boeing 757. Really do appreciate it. And that leads me to the last thing I wanted to say about the Kevin McCarthy speakership debacle. Let's throw this up on screen real quick. This is a common reaction you'll see from the liberal left as they discuss this debacle. So they're saying, There are less than 24 hours until the new Congress gets sworn in, and Kevin McCarthy still doesn't have enough votes to be Speaker of the House. Republicans are in complete and total chaos right now with no leader and no legitimate policy plan to improve lives. Not a great look. All right, so what he's correct about there is the fact that they have no legitimate policy plan to improve lives. That is 110% correct, and you're definitely not going to hear any argument from that on that from me. However, let's be honest, your average American citizen, your average normie that doesn't follow politics like Zach and I and you guys listening right now, they don't fucking know what's going on with Kevin McCarthy and the fact that some 9 House members are holding up the speakership. They don't give a fuck. This does not reflect poorly on the Republican Party to your average voting American. Even if they are paying attention to this, they will have long forgotten this episode by the time the next elections comes around. No one really fucking cares. And to be honest, as someone who does care and as someone who does follow this, I look at what's happening right now as, a somewhat impressive episode in the Republican Party, because at least they're actually hashing out their differences, whatever stupid differences they might have. At least they're hashing them out, and at least it shows that not everyone in the caucus is just a mindless sheep ready and willing to fall in line behind the guy at the top who's turn it is or whose time it is to become leader. No, they're actually hashing out their disagreements, and there are specific members of the caucus that are saying, no, for X reasons, X, Y, and Z, again, some of which might be pretty fucking stupid, we're not going to support Kevin McCarthy. We want this person, or we want this policy. We want this concession. That's what should happen with a democratic system in a democratic society. It shouldn't just be passed off to some asshole who's time it is or whose turn it is. They should hash out their differences. They should come to a conclusion. There should be a rigorous debate. And I don't think the fact that there is a debate happening within the Republican Party is necessarily a bad thing. Again, despite the fact that the policies they're advocating for are total trash, and despite the fact that, yes, they have no legitimate policy plan to improve lives. But no, I actually think this is an attractive quality to your average voter. They look at this and they say, well, yeah, these are just a bunch of fucking sheep ready to fall in line.
That's such a great point, bro, because I think that's very true. And it just shows how the swamp monsterification, that group think, that partisan goggles, whatever you want to call it, right? That it's so immediate, right? Like this guy advertises himself as like the youngest Biden delegate, right? So I saw a lot of tweets that were like, you're too young to legitimately believe this, bro. Stop fucking hustling for a job. Like, it's just like, obviously you don't fucking like, you're either so in the weeds with the tribalness that you're like, ha ha ha, these people won't fall in order and obey their superiors. Look at these fools. It's like, nah, dude, that's actually what you should do. That's what all those people who you're talking to think is happening behind the scenes, right? They all think it's the West Wing out there with everybody at each other's throats, telling each other the best idea. No, this is the best idea. No, we can't have Social Security like this. We have to have Social Security like this. If we don't privatize, it's going to go out of business. If it's privatized, it's ruined. Like, that's not what happens behind the scenes in the White House. That's not what goes down. Yeah, it's raining cats and dogs out here. So Gavin and I both want to listen to it a little bit selfishly while we're still on the mic. I made pot roast earlier, so I'm not like I'm like super in the spirit of fucking winter weather. But anyway, all I was gonna say about that is that, yeah, people actually want there to be intense debate between their elected officials. That's what they think is happening. And I think that's the only other thing I'll add. It's like they all legitimately think that there is discourse and debate for the most part, right? Like if you're like, how does government work? It's like, oh yeah, they debate ideas. There's a bill. Oh, I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I've made my way to Capitol Hill, right? Like that's how it works, right? And it's like, no, honey, no, it's not how it works. And that guy's just like showing you the Democratic Party's ass and how fucked everybody is into just doing exactly what the leadership tells them.
Absolutely correct. Also, shout out to you, Pedro the Lion. Just realized you sent this in earlier. We missed it. Unionized 2023 Workers United. Hell yeah, bro. 100%.
Shout out to you, bro. Absolutely. Really appreciate that. And hope you have a great 2023.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pedro. Really appreciate that. And also, on a similar note, thank you, Sean DeStefano, for the $9.99. Happy New Year's. Let's get more unions. Fuck yeah, bro. Once again, 100% agree. Hoping to see some more labor action in the 2023. And I think that snowball will just keep rolling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the most positive thing to look back on from 2022. That is, that's our biggest W. I feel like it's the increase in unionization. The big wins that we saw from guys like Chris Smalls over at Amazon, the John Deere strike. We saw the Lay's chip strikers. We saw Countless Starbucks workers go on strike and try and unionize their store. We saw the railroad worker strike, which unfortunately was fucking broken by the United States government, but that was still an incredible display of solidarity by those workers. So we've seen a lot of good shit. We've seen a lot of good developments. There were multiple union strikes that I did not mention. Glossed over those, but are just as valued and worth the fight. And a couple of really close calls to organize Amazon that went the other way, unfortunately. So, yeah, and yeah, shout out to everybody for tuning in, and let's get some more New Year's. Appreciate you, Sean DeStefano. Sorry, I was reading something.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Sean. Really do appreciate that. And one of my New Year's resolutions for the Vanguard is for us to hopefully get some more labor leaders and union activists on the show to share their perspective and to give more insight into the labor struggle, which has been unfolding over the last couple of years. I think that would be a great addition to our show. And again, that's a New Year's resolution I have, to focus more on those issues and to have more of those comrades on to chat and platform. But thank you so much, Sean. Really, really appreciate that. And also shout out to you once again, Alex, for the $9.99. Thank you so much. I wish Gates advocated for legal weed and being against war as his concessions, which are his only good policies. That's very true. Matt Gates is one of those weird Republicans where he does have a few issues where it's like low-key kind of based, and legal weed and being anti-war, definitely two of those issues. So yeah, that would be awesome. And that's the problem, right? That's the difference between the left and the right. It seems like the reasons why Matt Gaetz and his ilk aren't supporting Kevin McCarthy, they're not as substantive. It's more about personality. It's more about, do you support Trump? Are you pro or against Stop the Steal? Like these kind of dumb issues that have become very divisive within the Republican Party, but they're not as substantive. Versus when leftists were calling on the Justice Democrats to force the vote in 2020 and hold up Nancy Pelosi's speakership, it was all about policy substance. It was about, let's get a House floor vote for Medicare for all, and other policies. That one was the main one, but there were other policies as well. And that's largely the difference between the right wing and the left wing in this country.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, because Gates knows how fucking unwilling, just how absolutely unwilling the Republican Party would be to get behind legal weed, or like they're not going to go against war. That would be like the squad demanding that, in order for us to force the vote, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. They're just not, they weren't going to do it. Like, it wasn't like them demanding that they were going to force the vote. Or excuse me, that they were going to pass Medicare for all if they withheld their vote. It was like, no, it's just for a floor vote. Like, you ask for something that it's like they really don't want to give you, but like maybe if you like have something that they really don't want, it's called leverage. So yeah, I mean, maybe getting behind legal weed, maybe moving the official Republican Party position to like, remove it from a Scheduled I control substances list and then let the states decide. Like, that could have been something that he would have gotten as a potential concession. Probably not, but potentially. But that would have been a way better ask than just being like, legalize it, bro. Like, you could put it in some verbiage that would make it more palatable to the Republican Party and make it easier for them to swallow that bitter pill, which is coming down the pipeline. And I do think more and more Republicans, especially younger Republicans, people that want to win, like Matt Gaetz, like JD Vance, even, I think that they'll come around on the legal weed thing, because their constituents already smoke. Even people that vote Republican smoke weed. I know all these fucking country guys in Missouri. They come into my bar. They smell like weed. I'm like, I know what weed smells like. Do you fucking vote for Republicans? Because they don't fucking want that shit to be legal. Well, we all voted for the fucking state amendment, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you fucking did. After you've been voting for all these assholes that wanted it banned forever. So anyway, that's real. But anyway, shout out to you, Alex. Really appreciate your active involvement. And shout out to you, Susie Stone. Always great to see you in the chat. Really appreciate your generous donation today. Man, we are on a roll. The chat is taking care of us. You guys love us. It makes our heart so full, and it also makes us excited to know we can pay rent. So if Trump ran third party, he could really screw things up in general, which might be a good thing. Maybe a Democratic escapee could run third party as well. Boy, wouldn't that be interesting? That would be based, actually. And to be honest, it might fuck some shit up for the Democrats and put a fire under somebody's ass if we could legitimately point to, kind of like how when what's his face, man? I always forget this fucker's name. The guy that Ross Perot did the third party that caused George H.W. the re-election. And after that, then it was like, then it really ignited a lot of third party people to get that idea. Like Jesse, probably, I mean, I know he was like, like friendly-ish with Ross Perot, at least at that time. And I imagine was like, hey, yeah, fucking third party, let's go. There was created a lot of energy behind that. And obviously Jesse's win took it to another level because he actually won his, election, even though, I mean, he was governor, not president, which is, still a massive feat, but admittedly not quite as difficult as becoming president. And Ross Perot raked in a fuckload of votes, guys. If you go, you'll be shocked. Let me look it up right now because Gavin's not here, and I have to just talk to myself for a second. So 1992 election results. I think it's like 20%, I think. If I'm not crazy, he won like 20% of the popular vote. Yeah, 18.9% of the popular vote. That's fucking insane, dude. That's insane. For a third party by modern standards. So if somebody came out, like, if Trump ran, he could do even better than 20%. So you've imagined that 20%'s gone. Okay, so now you're fighting over like, the remaining 80% of the country. The Democrats still have their like, 49, 51% of the country, depending on the year, right? 52%. So that would basically guarantee sinking the Republican Party. But if a true populist ran, like a guy that was really running and getting after it, that could unite that kind of like Trump and nondescript voter and progressive young person Democrat voter, that would be a real party. I don't know who would come out on top. I genuinely don't know. I think Trump might come out on top in a fucking gun to our head, because he's got so much credibility. Unless Bernie Sanders ran, unless Bernie just says, fuck all, I'm going in. That would be insane. And I know I have all kinds of Bernie Sanders things. And I know there's a real subsect on the left that just loves to shit on Bernie Sanders. I'm like, I don't know if you don't want there to be like massively inspired crowds again of people that want to talk about left-wing politics. But I always think that's a good idea for us. And Bernie is still alive. And as long as that heart is pumping, I think it would be beneficial to have his name on a presidential ticket, just kind of like as a token of like what we could fucking actually be voting on. And I always say that Bernie makes a great compromise. Like, I'm not asking for everything. I'm just asking for Bernie Sanders. That's a guy I have a lot of disagreement with, but I could still vote for in, relative good conscience. And people, he broke me. Yeah. Anybody else you vote for in your entire life is going to be shittier than Bernie Sanders. So why don't we just say that's the line for anybody who's an absolute fuck all Puritan? You still have to vote for Bernie Sanders for president, or I don't take you seriously, because then you just hate the idea of winning.
Agreed. I totally agree with that. He is the perfect compromise candidate. And honestly, despite the fact that, like I said, if Trump did run third party, it would be for selfish, narcissistic reasons, not based on a serious policy difference or agenda. I still would respect it because at least he would have the fucking balls to do so, unlike Mr. Bernie Sanders, who I do have a lot of respect for, but who never had the balls to seriously challenge the establishment to that extent. When push came to shove, he did endorse Hillary Clinton, even after getting completely fucked over and screwed in the most undemocratic possible fashion in 2016, and then once again in 2020, which of course was totally depressing and pretty pathetic to watch. You can't say that about Trump, despite all of my criticisms of the guy, and despite the fact that he's absolute trash on policy. At least he doesn't capitulate to Republican Party leadership in the same way, and at least I could see a world where he would say, no, fuck you, I'm not getting the nomination, I'm staying in this race, and I'm potentially going to take the fucking, election from you in the process. You do have to kind of respect that. And I wish we could see a little bit more of that energy on the left, specifically from the Bernie crowd.
Absolutely. So shout out to you, Susie Stone. Really appreciate that generous donation, like we said. And as always, it's great to see you in the chat. Did get a few more super chats. Legal weed should be liked by the GOP, small government. Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, there are actual voters who aren't controlled by the corporate oligarchs. Like, I mean, let's talk about Trudy Bush Valentine, who is not a fucking Republican. She ran as a Democrat, but that Anheuser-Busch money, bro, that Anheuser-Busch money is what paid for a lot of this anti-weed legislation. And really, it goes back way further than that. And they were worried about the hemp market. And that was a big part of what took it over. But the beer and wine and spirit market, right? They did not want weed to be legal because they just saw that as immediate direct competition, right? And so they, instituted the weed prohibition a long time ago, but they've been sustaining it based off of that kind of propaganda model. Anyway. So
Oh, absolutely, 100%, Alex. It's ridiculous too, because this is one of the rare areas where a policy is actually both the correct policy and the policy that the corporate America wants. That's very rare, but this actually is one of those instances, and it's crazy that every politician, but specifically the GOP, who, like you said, Alex, pretends to care about small government, has not embraced, because actually most of their corporate donors, whether it's big pharma or whatever, would approve and actually wants this to happen because it would enrich them further. So it's pretty crazy they haven't embraced it yet. And like Zach was saying, most Republicans at this point smoke weed too. At this point, at least for people of our age, smoking weed is just like drinking beer. You know, you hang out with your friends, you drink a beer. No one would really be like puritanical about it. Most people in our generation don't associate it with a lot of like the racist tropes that once did exist alongside drugs like cannabis. But there still is this ideology and mindset within the older factions of the GOP, this very puritanical based outlook on cannabis, which does equate it with being satanic and, you know, all of these racist tropes that once existed in relation to the drug. And that still kind of infects the mindset of, again, a lot of the older GOP senators and Congress people and state level local officials that are preventing it from becoming legalized in any given context, right? So I think that's why it still hasn't been embraced to the fullest extent by the GOP, and we'll see if that change. I think it already is, because a lot of the younger people in the party, like Matt Gaetz, have realized the winds of change are blowing.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like Alex goes on to clarify, I do think that legal weed is pretty much inevitable. So it's like it's a fighting a losing battle, kind of like how, you know, the gay marriage thing. It's kind of settled already. Like, I mean, barking up that tree and being like, gay people shouldn't get allowed to get, like, good luck winning the fucking 18% of the country, 20% of the country, or winning with that vote. Like, oh, that's who you're appealing to. It's like, come on, bro, come on. Like, it's not serious. It's like, you're not going to win with that. People don't believe in that anymore. Like, try running on banning alcohol. Like, go ahead, run on that ticket. Try and bring back prohibition. 100-year anniversary. Let's bring it back. Woohoo! Let's kill the Roaring Twenties with fucking prohibition. No, it's not gonna happen. You're not gonna get anybody to jump on that train. Nobody's gonna get on that platform because that's stupid and dumb, and nobody will vote for you if you run for that. So anyway,
someone should try though. That would be funny.
It might no, yeah, maybe it would be funny to laugh at. That's for sure. So shout out to you, Al.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. And it looks like we got one more super chat. Thank you so much, Nicholas Rodriguez, for the $4.99. The anti-capitalist streaming left should pool their capital and start a democratized streaming business by leftists for leftists. Richard Wolff lays out how. Okay, Nicholas. So I agree with your idea in concept and in theory, and I think that that is an admirable project to work on. I think that if a lot of leftist commentators and streamers started doing that, that would be a good idea for sure. In no way am I against it, but we also do have to be realistic and acknowledge the fact that until that project becomes realized or is feasible and is widely viewed or used as a product, it's never going to actually compete with the already existing social medias and streaming companies like YouTube, like Twitch, that we also have to take advantage of. Again, until we get to the point where we can come up with a viable alternative. But in the absence of a viable alternative, we cannot just abandon what is basically the new public square in order to try to build that, because there's no guarantee that would succeed. I mean, there's already a couple streaming services that are run by leftists, like Means TV, for example, and unfortunately they just haven't gained the traction necessary in order to seriously compete with the currently existing social medias and streaming companies. So like I said, while I totally agree that's a valiant idea and something that should be worked on, we can't just abandon the spaces that we're currently occupying and cede the discourse to the right wing and to corporate Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, and also you have to get
You're muted.
To actually like agree and participate in something.
Are you? I think you're muted.
No, I'm not muted.
Oh, weird. I can't hear you.
No, my mic did turn off though. That's weird.
Zach's mic went out somehow.
Hold on, let me just fix this really quick.
That's bizarre.
All right, well, you guys should be able to hear me now. Yeah, you can. I can hear myself at least.
Huh. Sorry,
that was weird.
That was weird as hell. We just got booted out of the studio. Everything's fucked up. The feds are after us. This is absolutely insane. It's saying it's registering my audio, so if you guys can't hear it, I think that's fucked. But okay, whatever. Anyway, what I was going to say is that the left can't even get like Twitter messaging on the same page, so it's going to be really hard for us to fucking run a streaming platform. And then it's like now you're getting in the business of like having to compete with major tech companies, and you're going to have to staff that, and you're going to have coders, and you're going to have fucking secretaries, and you're gonna have janitors, and you're gonna have to run all of that like a worker co-op, and you're gonna have to be massively successful at it, and you're gonna hope you don't go out of business when every poor trick in the book is run to put you out of business because they can't have a worker co-op succeeding in this way, and then you're a threat to society, and then you're getting all kinds of bad press and X, Y, and Z. So sounds great on paper. In execution, I think it's way more difficult, but I love where your head's at, Nicholas. I think the best thing that we could hope for is to see more of the kind of style of thing that Breaking Points is doing, which is like a larger independent network on YouTube, similar to what the Young Turks did, but a little bit different, to which they bring on Maximilian Alvarez, they bring on Jordan Sheraton, they bring on Ryan Grimm, and not just lefties like Emily Jasinski, Marshall Koslov, other people, they're on there to give their perspective as well. Sagar's perspective as well as a non-leftist, but this independent network that exists under the banner of YouTube, because Gavin's right. I used the analogy earlier, you want to be a lumberjack, you got to go to where the forest is. And the people we want to reach are on YouTube. That's why we're here. Right. Otherwise, you could do a show on television and then just reach the television audience. Right. And obviously, it comes with its own set of rules, and it's different. And, we don't have the direct corporate editorial oversight that you have in television. And that would be another unique negative factor. But it's also, we just need to reach the people where they already are. And YouTube gets so much traffic. Twitter gets so much traffic that, that's where the people are to be reached. And Twitch also gets an enormous amount of traffic, just not for the Vanguard. If you're the Vanguard, you get like 3 viewers on Twitch, and it's just embarrassing. You feel like the guy at the urinal that can't make a pee because there's other people around. Just this like the most humiliating thing ever.
It's hilarious. Shout out to you, Nicholas. I definitely like where you're thinking, and like I said, it's something we should work on. I just don't think we can abandon these spaces in the meantime until something like that exists as an alternative. But really appreciate the super chat, and shout out to you, Alex, once again for the 199. Thank you so much, Alex. I'm proud to go to the first weed shop in New York tomorrow. Are the first weed shop that you've gone to, or like the first one ever? Are you saying it's like the first one to ever exist or something? Because I didn't think that was in New York. But either way, regardless, that's super cool. I'm super excited to go get some legal weed in Missouri next month when it officially becomes recreationally legal. So yeah, that's always super exciting. Still, honestly, a little bit surreal to me that you can just go into a store and fucking buy weed. Like, Zach and I are pretty young, but we are old enough to remember the days when the thought of walking into a fucking store, pulling out your credit card and buying a quarter of like fucking Kim Dog 98 or whatever the fuck was just a mind-blowing like fantasy. So it is still a little bit surreal to me just to purchase weed in any capacity anywhere. And yeah, it's definitely going to be crazy when that shit hits the fan here in Missouri.
Yeah. And I think Alex went on to clarify, he means the first like legal, because I was going to say I don't know if there was medical, you can clarify before for us in New York, Alex. I imagine there was, but this is probably like the first legal rec one because it's the new year. And I imagine, so that's cool. And yeah, first time I went into a Missouri dispensary, I was also like mind blown. You can bring your dog in there. I was in there and I didn't bring Malcolm because I normally bring Malcolm everywhere, but I made him stay home. And I was just gone for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but then I was in there and this dude had this massive like Labradoodle in there, and it was just fucking running around like going clean. I was like, oh, they're laid back in here. And they were like, oh yeah, some of our patients, and I have a med card, so they gotta call us all patients. And they're like, some of our patients like to have their animals with them. I'm like, bitch, I'm never leaving my dog at home now. Like, let's go.
Do they have those like CBD dog treats and stuff too?
They gave them dog treats. I don't know what the fuck they have in them, but I watched the dog eat dog treats. That's for sure.
Either way, shout out to you, Alex. Really appreciate it. And I think that just about wraps up our show for today. We had a couple more stories we were going to get to, but it is getting a little bit late, and we wanted to save some stuff for tomorrow's stream as well. So make sure to hit that notification bell if you haven't already, so you don't miss tomorrow's live stream, which we're super excited for. Of course, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that like button on your way out. if you have not. We'd really appreciate it. Plus, of course, we do like to end all of our shows with a big shout out to the patrons. The links in the description. If you guys are a fan of the show, if you like our perspective and content and want to see more, help keep the show healthy and sustainable, please hit that link up in the description. Patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. Even just $5 or $6 a month really does go a long way. So again, we really do appreciate that, you guys.
Yeah, peace out, everybody. Tune back into tomorrow. We'll do some Tulsi dunking. You can get the best and worst by our definition of 2022. And then also get Gavin and I's predictions on what the fuck is going to go down in 2023, how it's all going to shake out, and whatever else comes across our purview. Like we said, we're going to be hitting it hard in 2023 with the Vanguard. Holidays are over. We're ready to rumble. If there's nothing good to talk about, we're going to talk to chat. This is going to be exciting. We've got a lot of good stuff in the pipeline, and we'll be back tomorrow. So, take care, everybody. We'll be back.